The massive space station called Nexus 7 floated in the darkness between 3 different star systems. It was a place where beings from 100 different worlds came to trade and work and live together. Ships arrived every hour bringing goods and workers from across the galaxy. The station was so large that a person could walk for days and never see the same corridor twice. Emma Parks stepped off the transport ship and took her first breath of recycled station air. She was 24 years old, and this was her first time leaving Earth. She stood 5 feet and 2 inches tall, which made her short even by human standards. Her black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the plain gray uniform of a contract engineer. She carried a heavy equipment case in both hands. Inside were tools she had spent years learning to use. Tools that could fix reactor cores and repair power systems that most species did not even understand. Emma had graduated at the top of her class and had been chosen for this mission because she was the best at what she did. But none of that mattered to the beings who watched her struggle through the crowded docking bay. The station was filled with aliens of every shape and size. Some had scales, and some had fur, and some had skin that changed colors with their moods. Many of them were twice the size of Emma, or even larger. They moved around her like water flowing around a small stone, barely noticing she was there. Emma did not mind being overlooked. She had been overlooked her whole life. She was used to people assuming she was weak or useless because of her size. She had learned long ago that the best response was simply to do her job and let her work speak for itself. She was halfway across the docking bay when a shadow fell over her. Emma looked up and up and up until she saw the face of the largest alien she had ever encountered. He stood 8 feet tall and had 4 arms, each one thick with muscle. His skin was covered in dark green scales that looked harder than armor. His eyes were yellow with black slits for pupils, and they looked down at her with obvious contempt. This was Commander Thrax of the Velthari warrior species. He was in charge of all security on Nexus 7, and he ruled through fear and intimidation. The Velthari were known across the galaxy as one of the most dangerous species in existence. They were born fighters who valued strength above all else. Thrax let out a rumbling laugh that sounded like rocks grinding together. "Look at this," he said loudly so that everyone nearby could hear. "The humans send us their weakest. A tiny female who cannot even lift her own tools." Several aliens nearby laughed along with him. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Nobody wanted to anger a Velthari, especially one as powerful as Thrax. Emma said nothing. She adjusted her grip on the equipment case and kept walking. Thrax was not finished. He stepped in front of her, blocking her path. His 4 arms crossed over his massive chest, and he leaned down until his face was close to hers. "I have told the station council many times that humans do not belong here," he said. "You are too small, too fragile. You break too easily. And now they send me this little thing to prove my point." Emma met his gaze without flinching. "I am here to fix your reactor core," she said calmly. "If you will excuse me, I have work to do." She stepped around him and kept walking. Behind her she could hear Thrax laughing again, but she did not look back. The human quarter of the station was small compared to the areas claimed by larger species. It was located in a section that other beings considered undesirable because the gravity was slightly higher and the air was thicker. But for humans, it felt almost like home. Emma found her assigned quarters and began unpacking her equipment. She had just finished setting up her diagnostic tools when there was a knock at her door. The man standing in the hallway was human like her. He was tall and thin with kind eyes and gray hair at his temples. He introduced himself as David Kim and explained that he was a diplomat who had been stationed on Nexus 7 for 3 years. "I saw what happened in the docking bay," David said as Emma invited him in. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." Emma shrugged. I have dealt with people like him before. Big men who think size is everything. They usually lose interest when they realize I will not react." David shook his head slowly. "Thrax is different," he said. "He's been trying to get humans banned from this station for years. He claims we are too fragile for deep space work, that we are a liability. Every time there is an accident involving a human, he uses it as proof that we do not belong here." "Has he succeeded?" Emma asked. "Not yet," David replied. "But he has friends on the Galactic Council. Powerful friends who share his views about weaker species. If he can prove that humans cannot handle the work here, it can affect human contracts across the entire galaxy." Emma was quiet for a moment. She understood now that this was about more than just one rude alien. Her success or failure on this mission could have consequences for humans everywhere. "What exactly is wrong with the reactor?" she asked. David explained that the station's main power core had been experiencing fluctuations for months. The alien engineers who had tried to fix it had failed. The technology was based on human designs that other species did not fully understand. That was why they had finally agreed to bring in a human specialist. "The work is dangerous," David warned. "The radiation levels near the core are high. Most species cannot tolerate the exposure for more than a few minutes. But humans have shown unusual resistance to certain types of radiation. That is part of why you were chosen." Emma nodded. She had read the mission briefing. She knew the risks. "I did not come here to be safe," she said. "I came here to do a job." David smiled at her. It was the first genuine smile she had seen since arriving on the station. "I believe you," he said. "But be careful. Thrax will be looking for any excuse to prove that you are not up to the task. Do not give him one." After David left, Emma sat alone in her quarters and thought about what lay ahead. She was far from home on a station full of beings who saw her as weak and worthless. The most powerful alien on the station wanted her to fail. The work she had come to do was dangerous and difficult. But Emma Park had never let any of those things stop her before. She opened her equipment case and began preparing her tools. Tomorrow she would start work on the reactor. She would show Commander Thrax and everyone else on this station what a small human woman could do. Outside her window, the stars burned cold and bright in the endless darkness of space. Emma looked at them for a long moment, and then she got back to work. She had a lot to prove, and she intended to prove it. The arrival was over. The real test was about to begin. The first week on Nexus 7 was harder than Emma had expected. Not because of the work. The work was exactly what she had trained for. The reactor core was damaged in ways that would have taken alien engineers months to understand. Emma diagnosed the problem in 2 days. No, the difficulty came from Commander Thrax. He seemed to be everywhere she went. When she walked through the corridors, he would appear and accidentally bump into her hard enough to send her stumbling. When she needed supplies for her repairs, they would mysteriously go missing, and she would find out later that Thrax had reassigned them to other projects. When she entered the cafeteria, conversations would stop as aliens whispered and pointed at the tiny human who had somehow angered the most dangerous being on the station. The harassment was constant and creative. Thrax never did anything that could be proven as a direct attack. He was too smart for that. Instead, he used his position and his reputation to make Emma's life as difficult as possible. One morning, Emma arrived at the reactor chamber to find that her security clearance had been revoked. She stood at the sealed door while a nervous alien technician explained that there had been a mistake in the system. It took 4 hours to fix the mistake. 4 hours of standing in a hallway while Thrax walked past and smiled his sharp-toothed smile. Another day, Emma was called to a meeting on the far side of the station. When she arrived, she discovered that no meeting had been scheduled. Someone had sent her a false message. She lost an entire afternoon walking back to her work site. The other aliens on the station watched all of this happen. Some of them felt sorry for Emma, but none of them would help her. The Velthari were known for their violent tempers and their long memories. Anyone who stood up for the human would become a target themselves. David Kim visited Emma often during that first week. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes and the tension in her shoulders. "You can file a formal complaint," he told her one evening. "I can help you navigate the process. There are rules against this kind of harassment." Emma shook her head. "What would happen if I complained?" she asked. David was quiet for a moment. "The complaint would go to the station council," he admitted. "But Thrax has allies there. The process could take months. And during that time, he would probably make things even worse for you." "Then there is no point," Emma said. She went back to her work. She fixed the reactor one small piece at a time, working longer hours to make up for all the time Thrax stole from her. She ate her meals alone in her quarters to avoid confrontations in the cafeteria. She learned which corridors Thrax patrolled and found other routes to her destinations. It was not a good way to live, but Emma had survived worse. She was determined to finish her contract and prove that humans belonged on Nexus 7, no matter what Thrax did to stop her. Then, one day everything changed. Emma was in the reactor chamber running a diagnostic test when Thrax appeared with a group of his security officers. They were giving a tour to a delegation of alien officials who were considering investing in the station. "And this," Thrax said loudly, "is our human engineer. The one the Earth government forced us to accept." The officials looked at Emma with curiosity. She was covered in grease, and her hair had escaped from its ponytail. She looked small and tired, and not at all impressive. "As you can see," Thrax continued, "humans are barely suited for this kind of work. They are weak and slow, and they require constant supervision. It is a wonder this one has not injured herself yet." Something inside Emma snapped. She had endured the harassment. She had ignored the insults. She had kept her head down and done her job, just like she always did. But standing there in front of those officials, listening to Thrax lie about her and her species, she realized that keeping quiet was not working. Thrax was winning. He was using her silence as proof that everything he said was true. Emma set down her tools and stood up straight. "Commander Thrax," she said in a clear voice that carried through the chamber, "I challenge you to a contest of worth under Section 47 of the Galactic Accord." The chamber went completely silent. The contest of worth was ancient law. It dated back thousands of years to a time before the Galactic Council existed. It was a way for any being to defend their honor against discrimination or abuse. Once the challenge was issued, it could not be refused. To refuse was to admit that everything the challenger said was true. Thrax's yellow eyes narrowed. He had not expected this. The little human had surprised him. "You challenge me," he said slowly. "You understand what you are asking, little human. A contest of worth is not a game. It is a trial of body and spirit. Many who have challenged me did not survive." "I understand," Emma said. "Do you accept, or do you admit in front of these officials that everything you have said about humans is a lie?" The officials were watching with great interest now. This was far more entertaining than a simple tour. Word would spread quickly through the station. By tomorrow, everyone would know what had happened. Thrax had no choice. If he refused the challenge, he would lose all respect. The Velthari valued strength and courage above all else. A warrior who backed down from a challenge issued by a tiny human female would become a joke. "I accept," he growled. "Name your terms." The rules of a contest of worth were simple. Each party would choose one trial. Both parties had to complete both trials. Whoever performed better overall would win. "You may choose first," Emma said. Thrax smiled, showing all of his sharp teeth. Strength, he said immediately. We will lift the ceremonial stones. Each stone is heavier than the last. We lift until one of us can lift no more. This is a trial my people have used for generations. Emma nodded. She had expected him to choose something like this. The Velthari were famous for their physical power. Thrax probably thought he could crush her in a simple test of strength. Agreed, she said. And for my trial, I choose persistence. We will run through the station's maintenance tunnels. 30 miles. No stopping. No slowing down. Last one still moving wins. Thrax laughed his grinding rock laugh. You wish to race me, little human. My legs are 3 times the length of yours. I will leave you behind in the first mile. Then you have nothing to worry about, Emma replied. The contest was scheduled for 3 days later. Word spread through Nexus 7 like fire. A human had challenged a Velthari. A tiny female engineer had stood up to the most feared warrior on the station. Some said she was brave. Most said she was crazy. But everyone agreed on one thing. They could not wait to watch. The combat arena at the center of Nexus 7 had not been this crowded in years. Beings from every species on the station packed the observation decks. They climbed over each other and pushed for better views. Screens throughout the station broadcast. The event lived so that even those who could not attend could watch. Emma stood at one end of the arena floor. She wore simple exercise clothes and her hair was tied back tight. She looked small and alone on the vast arena floor. She looked like exactly what Thrax had called her. A weak little human female. Across from her, Commander Thrax stood with his forearms crossed over his massive chest. His green scales gleamed under the arena lights. He looked like a monster from a nightmare. He looked like something that could tear Emma apart without even trying. The ceremonial stones were arranged in a line between them. There were 12 stones in total, each one larger and heavier than the one before. The smallest stone weighed 100 pounds. The largest had never been lifted by anyone outside the Velthari species. It weighed over 2,000 pounds. Director Yuna Lee stepped forward to officiate. She was the highest-ranking human on Nexus 7, and she had insisted on overseeing the contest personally. Her face was calm, but Emma could see the worry in her eyes. The rules are simple, Yuna announced to the crowd. Each contestant will lift the stones in order, starting with the smallest. You must lift each stone to chest height and hold it for 3 seconds. If you cannot lift a stone, you are finished. The contestant who lifts the most stones wins this trial. Emma nodded. Thrax did not bother to acknowledge the rules. He already knew he would win this part of the contest. The trial began. Emma approached the first stone. It was a rough cube of dense metal about the size of a small table. She bent her knees and gripped the edges and lifted. Her arms strained, but the stone came up. She held it at chest height while the officials counted 3 seconds. Then she set it down. 1 stone. 11 more to go. Thrax lifted the first stone with one hand. He did not even look at it. His yellow eyes stayed fixed on Emma, watching her the way a predator watches prey. The second stone was heavier. Emma struggled, but she lifted it. The third stone was heavier still. Her arms began to shake. Sweat appeared on her forehead. But she lifted it. The crowd watched in silence. They had expected Emma to fail immediately. They had expected Thrax to humiliate her within minutes. Instead, the tiny human kept lifting. The fourth stone weighed 400 pounds. Emma could barely get her hands around it. She pulled with everything she had. Her face turned red. The veins in her neck stood out. The stone rose inch by inch until it reached her chest. She held it for 3 agonizing seconds and then let it crash to the floor. Thrax lifted the fourth stone with 2 hands. He made it look easy. The fifth stone was the turning point. Emma knew she was reaching her limit. Her muscles burned and her hands were slippery with sweat. She gripped the stone and pulled. It did not move. She adjusted her stance and pulled again. Nothing. Come on, she whispered to herself. Just one more. She thought about all the people watching. All the humans across the galaxy whose futures depended on her success. She thought about Thrax and his smug smile and his certainty that humans did not belong here. She pulled again. The stone rose. It rose so slowly that it seemed impossible. But it rose. Emma lifted it to her chest and held it while her whole body trembled. The officials counted 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then she dropped the stone and nearly collapsed on top of it. The crowd made a sound like a wave. It was not quite cheering, but it was close. They had not expected her to make it this far. Emma lifted the 6th stone. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. Blood vessels burst in her eyes, turning the whites red. She could taste copper in her mouth. But she held the stone for 3 seconds and set it down. The 7th stone defeated her. She pulled and pulled, but it would not move. Her body had simply reached its limit. No amount of willpower could change the fact that she was a small human woman trying to lift 700 pounds of metal. She stepped back and admitted defeat. 7 stones. More than anyone had expected, but not enough to win. Thrax lifted the 7th stone without difficulty. He lifted the 8th and 9th and 10th. He lifted the 11th stone with visible effort, his 4 arms working together to raise the massive weight. He lifted the 12th stone, the one that no non-Velthari had ever lifted, and held it above his head like a trophy. The crowd erupted in cheers. The Velthari in the audience roared their approval. Thrax had proven once again that his species was the strongest in the galaxy. One trial to me, Thrax announced to the arena. He looked at Emma with something like pity. You did better than I expected, little human. But strength is strength. You cannot change what you are. Emma wiped the blood from under her nose and stood up straight. No, she agreed. I cannot change what I am. And neither can you. She pointed to the arena exit where the maintenance tunnel entrance waited. Now we run. The crowd fell silent again. They had seen Thrax dominate the strength trial. Now they would watch him dominate the endurance trial as well. The Velthari were not just strong. They were fast and tireless and built for combat that could last for hours. Emma Park was about to learn what it meant to challenge a true warrior species. Or so they thought. Dr. James Cho caught Emma before she entered the tunnel. He was the station's human medical officer, and he had been monitoring her vitals throughout the strength trial. Emma, your body is damaged, he said urgently. You have micro tears in multiple muscle groups. Possible stress fractures in your wrists. You need to rest. Emma shook her head. I cannot rest. If I do not finish this trial, I lose by default. You could die in there, James said. Emma looked at him and smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had made peace with what was coming. Humans have been dying for the things we believe in since we first stood upright, she said. This is no different. She turned and walked into the tunnel. Behind her, the crowd watched the screens as both contestants disappeared into the darkness. The real contest was about to begin. The maintenance tunnels of Nexus 7 were not designed for comfort. They were narrow passages that wound through the guts of the station, carrying pipes and cables and all the systems that kept thousands of beings alive. The air was hot and thick and smelled of metal and oil. Emma ran. Her legs moved in a steady rhythm. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. She did not try to run fast. She did not try to catch Thrax, who had sprinted ahead at a pace that seemed impossible. She just ran at the speed she knew she could maintain. This was the secret that no one on the station understood. Humans were not built for explosive speed or overwhelming strength. They were built for something else. Something that had made them the dominant species on their death world of a planet. Humans were built to never stop. Millions of years ago on the plains of Africa human ancestors had developed a hunting technique unlike any other in the animal kingdom. They did not chase down prey with bursts of speed like the big cats. They did not ambush from hiding like the snakes. Instead, they simply followed their prey at a steady pace for hours and hours, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. It was called persistence hunting, and it made humans the most successful predators their planet had ever seen. Emma had studied this history. She had trained her body for exactly this kind of challenge. While other engineers spent their free time relaxing, Emma had run. She had run on treadmills and tracks and through the streets of every city where she had ever lived. She had run until her feet bled, and then she had wrapped them up and run some more. Now all that training was about to be tested. The first hour passed quickly. Emma found her rhythm and let her mind go blank. She focused only on the next step and the next breath. She did not think about the pain that was already building in her damaged muscles. She did not think about the 30 miles ahead of her. She just ran. Up in the control room, Lieutenant Grace Song monitored both contestants on her screens. She could see their locations in the tunnel system. She could see their vital signs transmitted by the sensors they both wore. And she could see something that made her frown. "Director Lee," she called out. "You need to see this." Yuna Lee crossed the room to look at the screens. "What am I looking at?" she asked. Grace pointed to the data. Thrax is 50 yards ahead and increasing his lead. His speed is incredible. But look at his core temperature. Yuna studied the numbers. The Valkyrie commander's body temperature was rising steadily. It had already climbed 2 degrees above normal and showed no signs of stopping. "He is overheating," Grace explained. The Valkyrie evolved on a cold world. Their bodies are designed for short, intense battles, not sustained effort. He's generating heat faster than he can release it. "What about Emma?" Yuna asked. Grace pulled up the human's data. Her body temperature was elevated but stable. Her heart rate was high but steady. Her pace had not changed since the start of the trial. "She is hurting," Grace said. "Her muscles are breaking down, and I'm seeing signs of stress fractures in her shins. But her cooling system is working. She's sweating out the excess heat as fast as she generates it. She is a persistence hunter," Yuna said quietly. Grace nodded. "She's hunting him." Down in the tunnels, Thrax was beginning to feel something he had never felt before. Doubt. He had run for 2 hours at a pace that would have left most beings far behind. He had climbed ladders and jumped obstacles and pushed his powerful body to its limits. And yet every time he looked back, the human was still there. Small and slow and impossibly stubborn. By the 3rd hour, Thrax was no longer running. He was jogging. His legs felt heavy and his breath came in ragged gasps. The heat inside his body was becoming unbearable. His scales were designed to hold warmth in, not let it out. He was cooking from the inside. He stopped to rest. Just for a moment. Just long enough to catch his breath. He looked back and saw Emma approaching. She did not stop. She did not slow down. She ran right past him without even glancing his direction. Thrax forced himself to start moving again. He could not let a human beat him. He was Valkyrie. He was a warrior. He was strong. But strength was not enough. The 4th hour was agony for both of them. Emma could feel the bones in her shins grinding with every step. Her muscles had stopped complaining and gone numb, which she knew was a bad sign. Her vision was blurring at the edges, and her mouth was so dry she could barely swallow. But she kept running. Thrax was worse. Much worse. His body was shutting down as the heat overwhelmed his systems. His forearms hung limp at his sides. His scales had turned pale, and his movements were clumsy and uncoordinated. He stumbled into walls and fell and forced himself up again. The crowd watching on screens throughout the station had gone completely silent. They were witnessing something they had never expected. Something impossible. The human was winning. Hour 5 came and went. Emma had pulled ahead. She was no longer following Thrax. She was leading him. She could hear his labored breathing somewhere behind her, getting fainter with every passing minute. Her body was screaming at her to stop. Every cell, every nerve, every fiber of her being was begging her to rest. But she had spent her whole life learning to ignore that voice. She had spent her whole life pushing past the point where others would quit. She was human. And humans did not stop. In Hour 6, Commander Thrax, the greatest warrior on Nexus 7, the being who had called. Emma, weak and worthless, fell to his knees and could not get up again. His body had finally failed him. His muscles had broken down, and his organs were dangerously overheated, and his nervous system was misfiring in ways that made it impossible to coordinate movement. He knelt in the tunnel and watched through blurring vision as Emma Park ran past him. How Thrax gasped. "How are you still running?" Emma did not answer. She did not have the breath to spare. But someone else did. Dr. James Shaw had been watching from the medical station. Now he spoke over the station's communication system so that everyone could hear. Humans evolved on a death world, he explained. A planet that tried to kill us every single day. We could not outrun the predators. We could not outfight them. So we learned to outlast them. We followed them until they collapsed from exhaustion. We never stopped. We never quit. That is what makes us human. Thrax heard the words, but he could not understand them. His species was stronger and faster and tougher than humans in every way. How could such a weak creature possibly defeat him? He did not realize that he had made the same mistake. Countless prey animals had made on the plains of Earth millions of years ago. He had underestimated the most relentless predator the universe had ever produced. A human being who refused to stop. Emma crossed the finish line at Hour 7. She did not celebrate. She did not raise her arms in victory or shout in triumph. She simply took 3 more steps, and then her legs gave out beneath her. She collapsed onto the cold metal floor of the arena and did not move. The crowd that had gathered to watch her fail now stood in stunned silence. They had seen something impossible. A small human female had challenged the mightiest warrior on the station and won. Not through strength or speed, but through something. They did not have a word for him, most alien. Languages, stubbornness, endurance. The simple refusal to quit. Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor. Dr. James Cho reached Emma first and began scanning her vital signs. What he saw made his face go pale. She has stress fractures in both legs, he reported. Severe dehydration. Muscle damage throughout her body. Her kidneys are struggling, and her electrolytes are dangerously low. Will she survive, Yuna Lee? Asked. James looked at the unconscious woman on the floor. She had pushed her body past every limit that should have stopped her. She had ignored every warning signal and every survival instinct. I do not know, he admitted. But if anyone can survive this, it is her. They carried Emma to the medical bay and began the long process of putting her back together. The damage was extensive, but human bodies were good at healing. That was another gift from their death world. Bones that knit back together. Muscles that rebuilt themselves stronger than before. Immune systems that fought off infections that would kill most species. Emma would recover. It would take time, but she would recover. Meanwhile, the station was changing. Word of Emma's victory spread through Nexus 7 within hours. By the next day, it had spread to other stations and ships and colonies. The story grew with each telling. A human woman no bigger than a child had challenged a Velthari warrior and won. She had run for 7 hours on broken legs. She had refused to stop, even when her body was destroying itself. The aliens, who had looked down on humans, began to look at them differently. They noticed things they had never noticed before. The way humans worked longer shifts than other species. The way they recovered from injuries that would have killed anyone else. The way they kept going when any sensible being would have given up. Some of them started to feel something that might have been respect. Others felt something that might have been fear. Emma woke up 3 days after the contest. The first thing she saw was director Yuna Lee sitting beside her bed. "You won," Yuna said simply. Emma tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. Yuna handed her a cup of water, and she drank gratefully. "The Galactic Council has opened an investigation into Thrax's treatment of humans," Yuna continued. "They are reviewing policies on all stations. Your victory has started a conversation that is long overdue." Emma nodded slowly. Her body ached in ways she had not known were possible. But she felt something warm spreading through her chest. She had done what she set out to do. She had proven that humans belonged here. "There is someone who wants to see you," Yuna said. She stood up and walked to the door. "I will leave you two alone." She left, and a moment later, Commander Thrax entered the room. Emma tensed automatically, but the Valkyrie did not look threatening. He moved stiffly, still recovering from his own injuries. His scales had lost their shine, and his yellow eyes were dim. He looked like a being who had faced something he could not understand and been changed by the experience. Thrax stopped at the foot of Emma's bed. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then slowly, painfully, he lowered himself to one knee. "I called you weak," he said. His voice was quiet and rough. "I said you did not belong here. I said humans were inferior." He raised his eyes to meet hers. "I was wrong." Emma studied him carefully. She had spent weeks suffering under his harassment. She had risked her life to prove him wrong. Part of her wanted to reject his apology. Part of her wanted to make him suffer the way he had made her suffer. But that was not who she was. "Stand up," she said. Thrax rose to his feet. His forearms hung at his sides, and for once, he did not look like a warrior. He looked like someone waiting to learn his fate. "I did not do this to humiliate you," Emma said. "I did it because you were wrong about my people. You judged us by your standards and saw only weakness. You did not understand that we are built for something different." "What are you built for?" Thrax asked. Emma thought about it. She thought about the millions of years of evolution that had shaped her species. The endless days of following prey across the savannah. The nights spent huddled together against predators that could have torn them apart. The stubborn refusal to die, no matter what the universe threw at them. "We are built to endure," she said finally. "To keep going when everything says we should stop. To survive no matter what. That is what makes us human." Thrax was quiet for a long time. Then he did something Emma had never expected. He extended one of his 4 hands toward her. "I would be honored to serve alongside you, Emma Park," he said. "If you would have me." Emma looked at his hand. She thought about all the reasons she should refuse. All the pain he had caused her. All the damage he had done to humans on this station. Then she reached out and took his hand. "Get up, Commander," she said. "We have work to do. That reactor still needs fixing. And you are going to help me carry the heavy parts." For the first time since she had arrived on Nexus 7, Emma saw Commander Thrax smile. It was not a cruel smile or a mocking smile. It was the smile of a warrior who had found an equal in the most unexpected place. The observation deck outside the medical bay was crowded with beings of every species. They had come to see the human who had done the impossible. When Emma and Thrax emerged together, the crowd erupted in cheers. But Emma was not finished. 3 months later, when a massive creature called a Devourer threatened to destroy the station. It was Emma who designed the defense grid. It was Thrax who led the ground forces. And it was the humans who refused to evacuate even when everyone else was running for the escape ships. They worked through days without sleep. They pushed through injuries that should have stopped them. They kept going when the situation seemed hopeless. A young alien child watched the humans working and tugged on their parents' arm. Why do they stay? The child asked. Why do they not run like everyone else? The parent looked at Emma Park, covered in blood and oil, still giving orders, still fighting, still refusing to quit. Because that is what humans do, the parent said quietly. They endure. The devourer was defeated. The station was saved. And across the galaxy, the story of Nexus 7 spread. The story of a small human woman who had stood up to a giant. The story of a species that seemed weak but was anything but. Years later, when historians wrote about the turning point in human-alien relations, they pointed to that moment. Not the diplomatic treaties or the trade agreements, but the day a human engineer named Emma Park ran for 7 hours on broken legs. Because she refused to let anyone call her weak. That was the day the galaxy learned the truth about humanity. They were small. They were fragile. They died easily and broke often, but they never ever stopped. And that made them the most dangerous species in the universe. Calling the human girl weak was his first mistake. It would not be his last, but it would be the one that changed everything.